Hello, kings and queens and everybody in between. In any RPG you've ever played, stats are everything. If you have a 1 attack stat firing off a 300 base power ability, you will be doing very bad damage compared to 10 attack stat and 150 base power. It isn't a big of a stretch to say that an RPG is just a very well presented live spreadsheet that sometimes has a timing element to its control. It really is all just math under the hood. And so, many internalize that a unit that inherently has a high number of a stat will generally be better than the other one that has lower stat. In a vacuum, this is logically true. However, in the context of live service games and fluctuating team elements, this becomes extremely complicated. If we take into account that every single character's scaling from their abilities is a result of whatever stats they have at a baseline, it comes with both good and bad results. If you have twice the amount of a useful stat that the other characters don't have, a game dev will obviously cut their base power in half to compensate for the sake of balance. But in doing so, this may have doomed the character to be obscured in the future. For example, have the other characters rest at a scaling of 100 on their abilities and attack at 100. Now have a special meta character that has 50 ability scaling and 250 attack. This meta character is obviously better than the others, but what happens in the next month when you put both in a team scenario where there is 100% attack as a buffer? Now obviously that special character does less damage. What if in 1 month you add another attack buffer that's stronger than the last one? Then another month, then another as the standard for your power creep. In the environment of live service games, this is one of the most common reasons why some characters decline worse than others. Stats that seem like they are rare now will eventually have multiple supports to dilute the baseline expectations and allow those to thrive or fail, all because of higher stats. In Star Rail for over the past year, it has happened enough that I can give you 3 characters that give extreme and perfect examples of why this is both a blessing or a curse. First, let's start off with a character that actually pulls off the high stats well, Xueyi. Xueyi is the current queen of free stats. The biggest reason why this even is the case is that she covers 2 of the rarest stat lines in the game. She easily has double the amount of damage percent a unit will ever reach, and has break effect of which very few characters actively buff. This is also a conversion, meaning there is no active opportunity cost of chasing one or the other. You are not losing a trade. This means that Xueyi at a baseline is rarely matched in unsupported damage and solo calculations. Of course, the opposite is true, that she can recede when put with conventional supports that just go all in on damage percent, but that doesn't really exist yet to the point that Xueyi becomes invalidated. If Xueyi's conversion was to attack percent, she would be actively worse as a crit carry since it's much more common currently and will be threatened by more attack percent buffers in the future. The fact that her scaling is low has actually helped her with mechanics like Ting Yun's additional damage, having nearly 3 times the amount of damage with Xueyi than other DPS units. If another one like Ting Yun comes around, then she will age better. Break effect being an offensive stat to Xueyi, while not actively harming her crit damage, means she has a future in both dealing impressive crit damage and break damage, even outside of crit, and vice versa with super break. 2 strong and worlds apart team archetypes. It seems that if either archetype is buffed in a major way, Xueyi will always be a likely consideration for a new coat of paint. For Xueyi's free stats to start aging, it's effectively a 2-headed monster. Design a support that gives so much damage percent that there would be an actual good reason to bench Ruan Mei and Robin even without their extra niche, and design another break effect conversion character, translating it into a much rare modifier. Both of these things have to happen for Xueyi's stat niche to get power creep, and both of which on their own have huge meta implications. For now, Xueyi is a great example of not only a unit that has a higher stat line that is make or break, but also why it has to be the correct stat line to actually reach greatness later on for both versatility and power. I've already made a video of Yanqing and specifically why there's been a bunch of reasons for his hindrance to be a top tier unit again. But he fits this distinction very well, and why the manner of executing high stats is similarly as important to how it impacts a unit's future. At the face of it, having a lot of crit rate is a very good quality. Unfortunately, this turned out to be really short-sighted. Yanqing's early meta presence was having a lot of free rare stats. This had a lot to do with the fact that nobody had amazing or even decent crit relics and built supports. To pull in other units like Sushang or Zila, he just had to work far less on his own in both stamina and gameplay with a meta conditional of using the best sustain in the game. It was rarely ever a bad thing, until it suddenly was. Don't get me wrong, free crit rate is very strong, but the amount of free crit rate Yanqing has is actually too much to the point that farming relics and rolling crit rate can quickly become a nightmare when it otherwise shouldn't. It turned out to bite him back later on when every character was getting more of it in relics, and crit rate going past 100% was an active loss and a more possible reality, especially with Hunt's light cones. Another critical element of why Yanqing's high stats is worse than it is that it is fluctuating. Crit rate is not the correct stat to do this sort of balance. Unlike damage percent like Xueyi's, the consistency gets shot the moment it leaves, and since Yanqing would have to overcap crit rate for the sake of consistency, what ends up happening is his free stats would stop mattering if you build crit rate just so you don't feel like a loser when you miss crit. But this will undoubtedly make your crit damage so low that Yanqing gets outpaced by other Hunt characters. This is the illusion of free choice, and one that actively feels bad. Yanqing's crit rate buff ultimately turns him into a damage window character with a slightly more annoying visual cue. If Yanqing or a support actually converted excess crit rate to high crit damage, he would actually see more use and, dare I say, be extremely competitive in the current meta, ignoring the other problems he currently faces, of course. That would be an excellent future for his stats. But as of now, Yanqing is surely worthy of taking on his Grandmaster's namesake theorem due to having a high stat, but unfortunately it's the wrong kind of stat. The most popular and the namesake of this recurring theme is Jingliu. While the memory of Yanqing is fresh on our minds, let's get one thing straight. Jingliu executes her free crit rate a lot better than Yanqing. Since she is a unit that leans so hard into damage windows, she wasn't gonna do damage on the downtime just on pure scaling alone, so at least the illusion of free choice is gone from the start. Jingliu's crit buff does hinder her the same way as Yanqing's does, but it is at least relatively better compared to the student. But if that's the case, why exactly is this called the Jingliu Theorem and not the Yanqing Theorem? It's precisely because Jingliu is a character that stat-wise has already reached her peak and directly has led to a shaky future of just either going down or never going back up. To go back to Yanqing, what if a support comes around that buffs crit rate? Like Yanqing, she's gonna have to hope overcapping has an active benefit, and Yanqing will actually age better in this light. Her huge enhanced state attack stat used to be the equalizer. Her attack made up for her skill's lower scaling, but instead, what happened? At the short term it worked, but it was a sealed fate that any future she has with an attack percent support isn't going to be as big of a deal as other damage dealers. Her mechanics specifically are damage window based, and Bronya is quite literally perfect, and any other direct upgrade would also buff everyone else better. In fact, Bronya is so perfect that even when the direct upgrade Sparkle came along, she was a directly worse replacement only for Jingliu in buffing and for turn advance, when it otherwise shouldn't be because Sparkle gives skill points. Oh, also, Jingliu doesn't spend a lot of SP, so even the best way she has potential for SP hungry supports has its own downsides. And the reason why Sparkle will enable less damage than Bronya is because Jingliu's baseline crit damage is much higher than her damage percent. It's safe to assume that stronger crit damage buffers aren't going to be that much better due to that reason. What about additional damage like Tingyun for Xueyi? The problem with that is her scaling isn't low enough to be significant, and her free stats is the wrong kind of stats for abusing that mechanic. What if Furina was in a crossover and dropping HP was the best way to buff damage percent? Her HP drain actually is not that low, and Arlan, Clara, and Blade can do a much better job at that, and the prospect of Arlan somehow aging better as a support is obviously a bit of a half joke, but regardless, this is more of a testament of her niche than the stat itself, but it is pretty worth mentioning. The only other current ways to buff Jingliu is damage percent, and nearly everyone benefits from it better. This has contributed to her slow usage deterioration, as she just doesn't do enough damage with current buffers as much as other DPS units back when the supports didn't exist. Even including Jingyuan, who has his own theorem if this gets popular enough, her gimmick hasn't worked into her favor very well in recent memory. Jingliu is a unit that has owed her success to her high stat floor and has owed her eventual phasing out due to said floor. While she is still clearly viable today, the old master undoubtedly has less room to grow due to her high stats than the other units, which is pretty fitting for someone Mars-struck and fitting to be given this theorem's namesake. Trust me, there are a lot of characters that could have made this list, so comment below who you think didn't make the cut, or if you have someone better than the other ones I've mentioned here today. As always, please do all the algorithm stuff, and I will see you later.